David was having one of those days where everything felt off. His psychology thesis wasn't going anywhere, the campus coffee tasted like burnt water, and the rain outside seemed personal. He grabbed his laptop and headed to the university library, hoping a change of scenery might help his brain start working again. The library was packed because of the storm. Students were crammed into every corner, typing away on assignments or pretending to study while scrolling through their phones. David found a small table near the back, next to the psychology section. Perfect. At least he'd be surrounded by books about the human mind while his own mind refused to cooperate. He opened his laptop and stared at the blank document. His thesis was supposed to be about cognitive behavioral patterns, but right now, his own cognitive patterns were more like a broken washing machine. Lots of noise, but nothing getting clean. He rubbed his temples and tried to focus. That's when she walked by. She had dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, wore a simple green sweater, and carried about 6 different books like they weighed nothing. David found himself watching her move through the stacks with this confident, graceful way that made him forget about his thesis completely. She seemed to know exactly where she was going, unlike him, who felt lost most of the time. She caught him staring and smiled. Not the polite smile people give strangers, but something warmer. Something that made his stomach do a little flip. "Research not going well?" she asked, nodding toward his empty screen. David felt his face heat up. "Is it that obvious?" The blank document and the head-in-hands pose gave it away. She shifted her books to one arm. "Mind if I sit? Everywhere else is taken." "Please." He gestured to the empty chair across from him, trying not to seem too eager. She set her books down, and he noticed they were all neuroscience texts. Heavy stuff about brain imaging and neural pathways, way more advanced than his basic psychology coursework. "I'm David, by the way." "Maya. I work in the neuroscience department upstairs, research assistant." She opened one of her books, but her attention seemed more on him than the pages. "What's your thesis about?" "Cognitive behavioral patterns. Basically, how people's thinking affects their actions." He paused, then added, "When I can actually think about it, that is." Maya laughed, and the sound was better than any coffee for waking him up. "Writer's block is the worst. Your brain knows what it wants to say, but somehow it gets lost between thinking and typing." That was exactly right. David had been struggling to put that feeling into words for weeks. "Yeah, exactly. It's like my thoughts are there, but they're in some language I don't speak." "Maybe you're overthinking it," she said, and something about the way she said it made him look at her more carefully. Sometimes the most interesting thoughts are the ones we don't plan. As if to prove her point, David found himself thinking about how her eyes had these little gold flecks in them and how her smile was slightly crooked in a way that made it more interesting than perfect smiles. He wondered what it would be like to have coffee with her somewhere that actually served decent coffee. Maya's smile widened. "The coffee here really is terrible, isn't it?" David blinked. "Did I say that out loud?" "Say what?" "About the coffee." She looked confused for a second, then shrugged. "Lucky guess. Everyone complains about the campus coffee. It's like they make it specifically to keep students awake through pure caffeine shock." That made sense, David thought, though something about her reaction felt off. Not bad off, just different. Like when you think you hear your name being called, but nobody's there. They worked in comfortable silence for a while. Maya took notes from her textbooks in neat, precise handwriting, while David finally managed to write a few paragraphs about his thesis topic. Every so often, he'd glance up and find her watching him with this thoughtful expression, like she was figuring out a puzzle. The weird thing was, whenever his mind wandered, which it did a lot, she seemed to react. When he thought about how hungry he was, she'd reach for a granola bar from her bag. When he mentally complained about the student at the next table who kept tapping his pen, she'd glance over at the same guy with an annoyed look. It could all be coincidence. People pick up on body language and environmental cues without realizing it. That was basic psychology. but the timing felt too perfect, too consistent. The rain outside got heavier, drumming against the tall windows. David found himself thinking about how cozy the library felt with the storm outside, how nice it was to have someone to sit with instead of working alone. Maya looked up from her book right then and smiled. "I love rainy days like this," she said. "Everything feels more peaceful somehow." "Me too." David set down his pen. "Though I wasn't expecting to get any actual work done today." "But you did." She nodded at his laptop screen, where he'd somehow managed to write almost a full page. Sometimes a change of environment is all we need. Or the right company. The words slipped out before he could stop them. David felt his face turn red, but Maya just looked pleased. "That's sweet," she said. "Though I should probably warn you, I'm not always the best company. I have a tendency to know what people are thinking, and not everyone likes that." She said it like a joke, but something in her tone suggested it wasn't entirely funny to her. David thought about how she'd seemed to respond to his unspoken thoughts all afternoon. "Maybe some people just think interesting things," he said. Maya's expression shifted, becoming more serious and somehow more present. Like she'd been holding back before and now decided not to. "You really think that?" "I think most people's thoughts are probably pretty boring. Work, food, sleep, repeat. At least yours seem to come with good book recommendations." She laughed again, but this time it sounded different. More genuine, maybe. Or relieved. The storm outside started to ease up, and students began packing up to leave. David realized he didn't want this random study session to end. He'd felt more productive and more relaxed in the past 2 hours than he had in weeks. "I don't suppose you'd want to continue this somewhere with better coffee?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "I mean, if you're not busy." Maya gathered her books, considering. "I know a place off campus, small, quiet, and they actually know how to make coffee that doesn't taste like punishment." "Sounds perfect." As they walked toward the library exit, David found himself thinking about how this felt like the start of something important. Not just the coffee, but the whole afternoon. Meeting someone who seemed to understand his thoughts before he fully formed them himself. Maya glanced at him as they reached the door. "It is the start of something important," she said quietly. David stopped walking. "What did you say?" She turned to face him, and for a moment her expression was completely open, like she was deciding whether to trust him with something significant. "I said we should hurry before the coffee shop gets crowded," she replied, but her eyes suggested she'd said something else entirely. David stood there in the library doorway, rain-cooled air drifting in from outside, and wondered if he was going crazy or if something genuinely unusual was happening. Either way, he wanted to find out. "Lead the way," he said. Maya smiled that warm, crooked smile again. "I was hoping you'd say that." 3 weeks had passed since that rainy day in the library, and David couldn't shake the feeling that his world had tilted sideways. Not in a bad way, just different. Maya had become a regular part of his routine. They met for coffee, studied. Together took walks around campus. Normal friend stuff, except nothing about it felt normal. It kept happening. The thing where she seemed to know what he was thinking before he said it. At first, David tried to convince himself it was just good. Chemistry? Some people clicked so well they could finish each other's sentences. But this was beyond that. Yesterday, they'd been sitting in the campus park, and David was watching a guy struggling to parallel park his car. In his head, he was thinking, "Just give up, man. Find another spot." Maya had looked over at the same moment and said, "He should just find another spot," word for word. The day before that, they were in line at the bookstore, and David was mentally calculating whether he had enough money for both his textbook and lunch. He hadn't said anything, hadn't even looked at his wallet. But Maya had quietly offered to buy him a sandwich later. It was getting impossible to ignore. Today, Maya had invited him to her apartment. "I want to show you something," she'd said, with that serious expression she got sometimes. the one that made him feel like she was deciding whether to trust him with a secret. Her place was small but cozy, books everywhere, plants on every windowsill, and the kind of comfortable chaos that showed someone actually lived there. She made tea while David looked around, trying not to seem nosy. "You can look," she said from the kitchen. "I don't mind." David froze. He'd been thinking about whether it was rude to examine her bookshelf so closely. "Maya," he said carefully, "can I ask you something?" "I was wondering when you'd finally ask." She came back with 2 mugs of tea and sat across from him on the couch. "Go ahead. This is going to sound crazy. Try me." David took a breath. "Sometimes it feels like you can hear my thoughts. Not sometimes. A lot of times. And I know how that sounds. But I can't shake the feeling that you know what I'm thinking before I say it." Maya was quiet for a long moment, holding her mug with both hands. Steam rose between them like a barrier. "What if I told you that you're right?" she said finally. "I'd ask you to prove it." "Okay," she set down her tea. "Right now, you're wondering if I'm serious or if this is some kind of joke. You're also thinking about how this would change everything if it's true. And that scares you a little. But you're more curious than scared." David's mouth went dry. That was exactly what was going through his head. "You're also wondering how long I've been able to do this, and whether I've been reading your thoughts this whole time without permission. Have you?" "Yes and no." Maya tucked her legs under herself. "I can't turn it off completely. It's like hearing, you can try to ignore sounds, but you can't stop your ears from working. But I try to give people privacy when I can." "When did this start?" "I was 12. There was an accident." Her voice got quieter. "I was in the hospital for weeks. When I woke up, I could hear what the nurses were thinking. At first, I thought everyone could do it. Took me a while to realize it was just me." David stared at her. This should have been the moment he laughed, made an excuse, and left. This should have been too weird, too impossible. Instead, all he felt was pieces clicking into place. "Is that why you work in neuroscience?" "Partly. I wanted to understand what happened to me, but mostly I wanted to help other people who might be going through something similar." "Are there others?" "I don't know. I've never met anyone else like me." Maya looked down at her hands. "Do you know what it's like? Hearing people's thoughts all the time?" David shook his head. "Most people's. Minds are difficult. They're anxious, angry, judgmental. They think cruel things about strangers. They worry constantly about things they can't control. After a while, it becomes hard to be around people at all." "That sounds lonely?" "It is. I've gotten used to being alone because being around others is often painful." Maya looked up at him. "But your mind is different." "Different how?" "It's kind. Even your random thoughts are considerate. When you look at people, you wonder about their stories instead of judging them. When you're frustrated, you blame the situation, not the person. And when you think about me—" She trailed off, and David felt his face warm. "When I think about you—" "What?" Maya smiled, and it was that crooked smile he'd grown to love. "You think beautiful things. Romantic things, yes. But more than that, you wonder what makes me laugh. You think about conversations you want to have with me. You imagine doing small, sweet things like bringing me coffee or walking me home in the rain." David felt exposed, but not uncomfortable, like someone had turned on a light in a room he hadn't realized was dark. "Most people's attraction is selfish." Maya continued. "They think about what they can get. You think about what you can give. Do you know how rare that is?" I like you. A lot." "I know. I can feel it." "And David?" She reached across the space between them and took his hand. "I like you too. More than I've ever liked anyone. Even though you know all my embarrassing thoughts. Especially because I know all your embarrassing thoughts. They're not actually embarrassing. They're honest. They're human. Maya squeezed his hand. Do you know what most people think when they first see me? David shook his head. Surface things. Whether I'm attractive, whether I'd be interested in them, whether I seem smart or stuck up or approachable. You know what you thought? What? You wondered what I was reading and whether I was enjoying it. You noticed that I seemed confident and thought it was nice to see someone who looked comfortable in their own skin. You were curious about me as a person, not just as a possibility. David felt something shift in his chest. Not uncomfortable, more like a door opening. So what happens now? He asked. Now you decide if you're okay with this, with me knowing your thoughts, with having a relationship that's more honest than most people ever experience. And if I'm not okay with it? Maya's expression grew serious. Then we stay friends. And I try to give you as much mental privacy as I can. I won't push this on you, David. This has to be your choice. David thought about it. Really thought about it. A relationship where he could never hide, never pretend to be someone he wasn't, never put on a false face. It should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like relief. I think, he said slowly, that I'm tired of hiding my thoughts anyway, even from myself sometimes. Maya's smile was radiant. Really? Really. Besides, if you like what's in my head, then maybe it's not as messy in there as I thought. It's not messy, it's honest. And honest is beautiful. David squeezed her hand. So, what does this mean for us? It means we get to try something most people never experience. Complete honesty. No games, no pretending, no wondering what the other person is really thinking. That sounds terrifying and amazing at the same time. The best things usually do. As David sat there, holding Maya's hand in her small apartment, he realized his life had just changed in a way he never could have imagined. But looking at her face, seeing the hope and vulnerability there, he knew he wanted to find out where this impossible thing would take them. 2 months into their relationship, David discovered what it meant to be truly known by another person. It was like living in a house where all the curtains had been pulled back, letting sunlight into rooms that had been dark for years. Maya could sense his emotions as they happened, sometimes before he fully understood them himself. When he was stressed about his thesis, she knew before he said anything. When he was excited about something, she felt that joy too. When he was sad, she understood the exact shape and color of that sadness. It should have felt like losing himself, but instead it felt like finding himself. They were walking through the city park on a Saturday afternoon, the kind of perfect autumn day that made everything feel possible. Maya was telling him about her research project, something involving brain scans and memory patterns, but David found himself distracted by the way the sunlight caught in her hair. "You're not listening to me," she said. But she was smiling. I'm listening. You're talking about temporal lobe activity and how it relates to memory formation, but I'm also thinking about how beautiful you look right now. I know. Her smile widened. I can feel both thoughts at the same time. It's like having a conversation on 2 levels. That was the thing that amazed David most. With Maya, nothing was hidden. When he complimented her, she knew he meant it, because she could feel the genuine appreciation behind the words. When she said she cared about him, he could see it in her actions even before she spoke. "Does it ever get overwhelming?" he asked. "Being in my head all the time?" Maya stopped walking and turned to face him. "David, your mind is the most peaceful place I've ever been. Do you remember what I told you about other people's thoughts?" He nodded. She'd explained how most minds were like radio stations full of static, anxiety, anger, petty complaints, harsh judgments about strangers. "Your mind is like a calm lake," she said. "Even when you're upset or stressed, there's this underlying kindness, this curiosity about the world. It's beautiful." They found a bench overlooking the pond and sat together, watching ducks paddle around in lazy circles. David felt Maya's presence in his thoughts, not invasive, but companionable, like having someone read over his shoulder who actually enjoyed the story. "Can you teach me?" he asked suddenly. "Teach you what?" "How to understand you better. I can see your expressions, hear your words, but you experience everything I'm feeling. I want to know you that deeply, too." Maya was quiet for a moment. "You already do. In your own way. You notice things about me that I don't even notice about myself. Yesterday, you brought me tea when I was working late because you could tell from my posture that I was getting a headache. You didn't need to read my mind for that. But I want to understand you better. Your past, your fears, what makes you happy. What do you want to know?" David thought about it. "Everything. What was it like growing up with this ability? What's the hardest part? What's the best part?" Maya leaned back against the bench, looking out at the water. "The hardest part was learning that most people don't think the way I assumed they did. When I was young, I thought everyone was as kind and thoughtful as my parents. Finding out that wasn't true was difficult. And the best part? Meeting you." She turned to look at him. "For the first time in my life, I found someone whose thoughts I actually enjoyed hearing. Someone who made me feel less alone." David felt something warm spread through his chest, and he saw Maya's expression soften as she felt it too. "What's it like when we're close?" he asked. "Can you feel what I feel?" "Yes. When we hold hands, when you hug me, when we're sitting close like this, I can feel your contentment, your happiness. It's like being wrapped in a warm blanket." They spent the rest of the afternoon talking, really talking. Maya told him about her childhood, about the accident that changed everything, about years of feeling different and isolated. David shared his own struggles, the pressure he felt to have his life figured out, his fears about the future, his gratitude for finding someone who understood him. As the sun began to set, they walked back toward Maya's apartment. The city lights were coming on, and there was something magical about the evening that made everything feel more intimate. "David," Maya said as they reached her building, "can I tell you something?" "Always. I've never felt this connected to another person, not just because of my ability, but because of who you are. You make me feel normal and special at the same time." "You are normal. And special, and perfect exactly as you are." Maya's eyes got bright, and David felt a rush of emotion that he recognized, as partly his own joy and partly hers reflecting back to him. "Would you like to come up?" she asked. "I mean, just to spend more time together. Watch a movie? Make dinner?" "I'd love that." Her apartment felt different now than it had that first day when she'd revealed her secret. It felt like home. They cooked together, moving around the small kitchen with an easy rhythm. Maya knew when David needed space to chop vegetables, and when he wanted her close. David learned to read her subtle cues, understanding when she needed a moment to process the thoughts she was picking up from neighbors, or when she was simply enjoying being present with him. They settled on the couch to watch a movie, but neither of them paid much attention to the screen. Instead, they talked about dreams and fears and silly memories from childhood. Maya shared stories about the funny things she'd overheard in people's minds. David told her about his hopes for his career, his family, his future. "Can I ask you something personal?" David said during a quiet moment. "Everything between us is personal now," Maya replied. "Do you ever wish you didn't have this ability? That you could just be normal?" Maya considered the question seriously. "I used to. For years I wished I could turn it off, be like everyone else. But now? I don't think I'd change it even if I could." "Why not?" "Because it led me to you. And because it's taught me things about human nature that I wouldn't trade. Yes, people think difficult things sometimes, but they also think beautiful things. They worry about their families. They feel joy when they see sunsets. They love deeply even when they're afraid to show it. And now I have someone whose mind feels like home, someone who thinks about me the way I always hoped someone would." David reached for her hand. I think about you all the time. I know, and I love every single thought. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the city lights twinkle outside her window. David marveled at how different his life had become. 2 months ago, he'd been struggling alone with his thesis, feeling disconnected from everyone around him. Now he had someone who knew him completely and chose to be with him anyway. Maya? Thank you for trusting me with this, with all of it. She squeezed his hand. Thank you for making it safe to trust you. As the evening wound down, David realized that this was what real intimacy felt like. Not just physical closeness, but emotional transparency. Maya knew his thoughts. Yes, but more importantly, she accepted them. She saw all of him, the good, the awkward, the uncertain, and loved him anyway. It was the kind of connection most people spent their whole lives searching for, and somehow, impossibly, he'd found it. 4 months into their relationship, cracks began to show in their perfect connection. It started small, like hairline fractures in glass that you don't notice until the light hits them wrong. David first realized something was changing when Maya stopped mid-sentence during dinner at their favorite restaurant. Her face went pale, and she gripped the edge of the table. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Nothing. I'm fine." But her voice was tight, and she kept glancing at the tables around them, like she was hearing something unpleasant. "Maya, talk to me." She closed her eyes for a moment. "The woman 2 tables over is thinking about her divorce. The man behind you is angry about work. The couple by the window is fighting even though they're smiling at each other." She opened her eyes, and they looked tired. It's getting harder to tune them out. This had been happening more often. Maya would suddenly become distant, overwhelmed by thoughts that weren't David's or her own. Her ability, which had always been manageable, was becoming stronger and less predictable. "Maybe we should go home," David suggested. "No, I'm fine. Really." But even as she said it, she flinched like someone had shouted in her ear. David watched her struggle through the rest of dinner, and something cold settled in his stomach. Their perfect connection was becoming a burden for her, and he didn't know how to help. The problems got worse over the following weeks. Maya started having headaches from the constant noise in her head. She'd be fine when they were alone, but the moment they went anywhere public, she'd become tense and distracted. David could see her pulling away, not from him exactly, but from the world around them. And then there was his own growing discomfort. At first, having no mental privacy had felt liberating. Now, sometimes, it felt suffocating. It happened on a Tuesday evening when they were studying together at his apartment. David was struggling with a particularly difficult chapter for his thesis, feeling frustrated and stupid. Maya kept offering suggestions, helpful ones, but they were based on thoughts he hadn't shared out loud. "Maybe if you approach it from the perspective of cognitive bias," she said. "I wasn't even thinking about cognitive bias," David lied, though he had been. "David, I can feel your confusion. You're wondering if people's preconceptions affect their behavior patterns. I know you can feel it. That's the problem." The words came out harsher than he'd intended. Maya looked hurt, and David immediately felt guilty, which made him more frustrated, which made Maya more hurt. It was like being caught in a loop with no way out. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I didn't mean that." "Yes, you did. And that's okay. You're allowed to feel frustrated. But I'm not allowed to work through that frustration privately. I can't even have a bad day without you experiencing every second of it." Maya closed her book. "Do you want me to leave?" "No, I don't want you to leave. I want—" David ran his hands through his hair. "I don't know what I want. I love you. I love what we have. But sometimes I feel like I'm losing myself." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I can't think anything without wondering how it will affect you. I can't be angry or sad or confused without feeling guilty about making you feel those things too. I'm starting to censor my own thoughts." Maya was quiet for a long moment. I never wanted that. I know. This isn't your fault. It's just harder than I expected. The conversation ended with both of them feeling worse than when it started. David felt guilty for complaining about something Maya couldn't control. Maya felt guilty for being a burden. It was their first real fight, and it was about the very thing that made their relationship special. Things came to a head the following weekend when Maya had what she called an episode. They were at the mall looking for a birthday gift for David's sister when Maya suddenly stopped walking and pressed her hands to her temples. "Too many people," she whispered. "Too many thoughts." David looked around. The mall was crowded, but not unusually so. "What are you hearing?" "Everything. The teenage girl by the fountain is worried about her weight. The man in the suit is thinking about cheating on his wife. The mother with the stroller is exhausted and feels like a failure. The security guard is bored and judging everyone who walks by." Maya's breathing was getting faster. "I can't turn it off. It's all so loud." David guided her to a quiet corner near the bookstore, away from the crowd. "Focus on me," he said. "Focus on my thoughts." "I'm trying, but there's so much noise. And you—" She looked at him with eyes full of pain. "You're thinking about how you wish this would stop, how you wish we could just be normal." David's heart sank. Those thoughts had crossed his mind, but hearing them reflected back to him made him realize how they must sound to Maya. "Maya, It's okay. You're right. This isn't normal, and it's not fair to you." They drove home in silence, both lost in thoughts that felt too heavy to share. That night, Maya told David about her childhood in more detail than she ever had before. About the accident that changed everything, about years of feeling isolated and different. "I was in a car with my family," she said, sitting on her couch with her knees pulled up to her chest. "We were going to visit my grandmother. A truck ran a red light and hit us. Were you hurt badly?" "Physically, not too badly. Concussion, some broken bones. But something changed in my brain. When I woke up in the hospital, I could hear what the nurses were thinking. At first, I thought everyone had always been able to do that, and I just hadn't noticed." "When did you realize it was just you?" "When I told my mom that the doctor was worried about something he wasn't telling us. She asked how I knew, and I said he was thinking it really loudly. That's when we figured out something was different." Maya was quiet for a moment. "My parents tried to be understanding, but they were scared. They didn't know how to help me. I spent my teenage years feeling like a freak." "You're not a freak, aren't I? David, I can read minds. That's not normal. And now it's getting worse. Stronger. I'm picking up thoughts from farther away, from more people at once. Sometimes I can't tell which thoughts are mine and which belong to strangers." David moved closer to her on the couch. "Have you talked to anyone about this? A doctor? A therapist?" "Who would believe me? And even if they did, what could they do? There's no manual for this, no support group for people who can read minds." "What about the researchers you work with? They study the brain." Maya shook her head. "They study normal brains. What I have isn't normal. It's not even scientifically possible, according to everything we know about neuroscience." They sat together, in the dim light of her living room, both feeling lost. David wanted to help, but he didn't know how. Maya wanted to be normal, but she couldn't change what she was. "Maybe we need some time apart," Maya said finally, "to figure things out." "Is that what you want?" "No, but maybe it's what we need. You need space to think your own thoughts without worrying about me. And I need to figure out how to control this before it gets worse." David felt something break inside his chest. "I don't want to lose you." "You're not losing me. We're just taking a break. To figure out how to make this work without it destroying us both." "What if we can't figure it out?" Maya took his hand, and for a moment, the connection between them felt as strong as ever. "Then at least we'll have tried, and we'll have had something beautiful, even if it couldn't last." David wanted to argue, wanted to say they could work through anything, but deep down he knew she was right. Something had to change, or their perfect connection would become the thing that tore them apart. The next morning, David packed a bag and went to stay with his friend Alex for a while. As he drove away from Maya's apartment, he felt like he was leaving a piece of himself behind. For the first time in months, his thoughts were completely private. It should have felt liberating. Instead, it felt lonely. 3 weeks apart felt like 3 years. David threw himself into his thesis, finally finishing the project that had been hanging over him for months. But every achievement felt hollow without Maya there to share it. He'd catch himself thinking something funny or interesting, then remember that no one was listening to his thoughts anymore. The silence in his head was deafening. Alex, his college roommate who'd let him crash on the couch, finally confronted him on a Thursday evening while they were eating takeout Chinese food. "You're miserable," Alex said, not looking up from his noodles. "I'm fine." "Dude, you talk in your sleep now, and you keep checking your phone every 5 minutes like you're waiting for something." David set down his chopsticks. "It's complicated." "Is it? You love her. She loves you, but you're both too stubborn to figure out how to make it work. You don't understand the situation." "Then explain it to me." David almost did. He almost told Alex about Maya's ability, about the connection they shared, about why their relationship was impossible and perfect at the same time. But how could he explain something that sounded crazy even to him? "We just need some time to figure things out," he said instead. "Time apart or time together? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're both just scared." That night, David couldn't sleep. He lay on Alex's couch, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Maya. Was she okay? Was her ability still getting stronger? Was she managing better without the stress of worrying about his feelings all the time? He wondered if she was thinking about him too, then realized that for the first time in months, he had no way of knowing. Meanwhile, across town, Maya was having her own struggles. The silence where David's thoughts used to be felt like losing, a sense she'd grown to depend on. His mind had been her refuge from the chaos of other people's thoughts. Without that peaceful space to retreat to, everything else seemed louder and more overwhelming. She'd been working with Dr. Rodriguez, a neuroscientist at the university who specialized in unusual brain activity. Maya had finally decided to trust someone with her secret, and surprisingly, Dr. Rodriguez had believed her. "Your brain scans are unlike anything I've seen," Dr. Rodriguez had said during their third session. "There's activity in regions that shouldn't be active, connections that shouldn't exist. It's fascinating. Can you help me control it?" "I think so. We're going to try some techniques used with people who have sensory processing disorders, ways to filter input, to focus on specific sources while blocking out others." The training was exhausting. Hours of meditation, concentration exercises, learning to build mental walls between herself and the thoughts around her. But slowly, Maya began to notice improvement. She could sit in a crowded coffee shop for an hour without getting a headache. She could choose which thoughts to listen to and which to ignore. The breakthrough came during her 4th week of training. Dr. Rodriguez had brought her to the university cafeteria during lunch rush, the ultimate test of her new skills. "How are you feeling?" he asked as they sat surrounded by hundreds of students. Maya closed her eyes, focused on her breathing, and built the mental barrier she'd been practicing. The chaos of thoughts around her faded to a manageable background hum. "Better," she said, opening her eyes. "Much better." "And if you wanted to focus on someone specific?" Maya looked around the cafeteria. She could sense the general mood of the crowd, stress about exams, excitement about weekend plans, the usual college concerns, but it felt manageable now, under control. "I think I could do that," she said, "if I chose to." That evening, Maya made a decision. She picked up her phone and typed a message to David. "Can we talk?" David's response came within minutes. "I'll be right over." When David arrived at Maya's apartment, they both felt the awkwardness of separation. They'd seen each other almost every day for months, and now they sat on opposite ends of her couch like polite strangers. "How are you?" Maya asked. "Lonely," David said honestly. "You?" "The same, but also better in some ways. I've been working with a researcher, learning to control my ability." David leaned forward. "Really? How?" Maya explained the training, the exercises, the progress she'd made. "I can choose now," she said. "I can tune into someone's thoughts if I want to, or I can give them complete privacy. It's not perfect yet, but it's getting better." "That's amazing, Maya. David, I need to tell you something. These past few weeks, I realized that my ability was only part of the problem. The bigger issue was that I was using it as a crutch." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I was relying on reading your thoughts instead of learning to communicate normally. When I could feel everything you were thinking, I stopped asking questions. I stopped talking through problems. I let the mind reading replace actual conversation." David considered this. "I did something similar. I started censoring my thoughts instead of just talking to you about what was bothering me." "We both got lazy," Maya said. "We thought having this connection meant we didn't have to work at our relationship like other couples do. But other couples don't have what we have." "No, they don't. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't also have what they have. Real communication, trust, the choice to share things, not just the automatic knowledge of everything." David moved closer to her on the couch. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to try again, but differently this time. I want to use my ability as just one part of our relationship, not the foundation of it. What would that look like?" Maya took his hand. "It would look like me asking you how your day was instead of just knowing. It would look like you telling me when something's bothering you instead of hoping I'll pick up on it. It would look like us choosing to be intimate and honest with each other, not just having intimacy forced on us." "And your ability?" "I'll still have it, but I'll use it thoughtfully. Maybe when you're struggling with something and can't find the words. Maybe when you want to share a moment that's too deep for speech. But not all the time. Not as a replacement for being in a normal relationship." David felt hope rising in his chest. "That sounds perfect. But what about when it gets overwhelming again? When you pick up too much from other people?" "I'm still learning to manage that. But David, your thoughts were never the problem. Your mind is still the most peaceful place I know. Being connected to you makes everything else easier to handle, not harder." "I missed you," David said simply. "I missed you too. Every day." They spent the rest of the evening talking, really talking, in a way they hadn't done since early in their relationship. Maya told him about her training, about the progress she'd made and the challenges she still faced. David talked about his thesis, about how empty his achievements felt without her to share them with, about how much he'd learned to value their connection by losing it. "Can I ask you to do something?" David said as the evening wound down. "Anything." "Can you listen to my thoughts right now, just for a minute?" Maya smiled and nodded. David felt the familiar sensation of her presence in his mind, gentle and warm. He thought about how much he loved her, how proud he was of the work she'd done to gain control of her ability, how excited he was about their future together. He thought about the ring he'd been looking at online, about the life he wanted to build with her, about growing old together. Maya's eyes widened. "David, I love you," he said out loud. "All of you. Your ability, your strength, your kindness. I want to figure this out together, whatever it takes." "I love you too," Maya whispered. "More than I could ever put into words." "Then we don't need words for it." Maya laughed, the sound bright and happy in her small apartment. "We have both now. Words and thoughts. The best of everything. 6 months." Later, David defended his thesis successfully. Maya was in the front row, listening to both his spoken presentation and his nervous thoughts, ready to send him encouraging feelings whenever he needed them. It was the perfect balance of connection and independence they'd learned to create together. After the presentation, as they walked across campus hand in hand, David thought about how far they'd come. Their relationship wasn't perfect. No relationship was. But it was theirs, built on a foundation of complete honesty and mutual choice. "What are you thinking?" Maya asked, then immediately laughed. "Sorry, old habit. What would you like to share with me?" "I'm thinking," David said, "that we figured it out." "We did, didn't we? And I'm thinking that I want to spend the rest of my life figuring things out with you." Maya stopped walking and turned to face him. "David Chen, are you proposing to me?" "Not yet," he said, grinning. "But when I do, you'll be the first to know, in every possible way." Maya's smile was radiant. "I can't wait." As they continued walking, David marveled at how their impossible love story had become possible after all. It had just required something that all good relationships needed: communication, compromise, and the willingness to grow together. The fact that they could share thoughts was just an extra gift on top of all the normal, beautiful things that made love work.